The king of late night had a list, not written down, not posted backstage, but everyone who worked at The Tonight Show knew it existed. Some guests would never sit in that chair again. Others got the freeze-out treatment on camera. The smiling host America loved had a darker side the audience rarely saw. The unwritten rules broken. Johnny Carson ran The Tonight Show like a military operation, every segment timed, every joke rehearsed, every guest pre-interviewed. Break his rules, and you'd feel it. Not right away. Carson was too professional for that, but the invitation for a return visit, it wouldn't come. The show ran for 30 years, from 1962 to 1992. That's 4,531 episodes, thousands of guests, most played by the rules. They showed up sober. They stuck to the pre-interview topics. They let Johnny get the biggest laughs. Simple rules, but some couldn't follow them. Frank Sinatra knew the rules. He'd been on the show dozens of times. But in 1976, something shifted. Sinatra had been drinking backstage. Not unusual for Frank. But this time was different. He brought his entourage. They were loud, demanding. They wanted special treatment for everything. The lighting, the camera angles, even the temperature of Frank's water. Carson's producer, Fred de Cordova, tried to manage it, but Sinatra's people pushed harder. They wanted script approval. They wanted to see the questions in advance. Not just topics, exact questions. Carson said no. The tension backstage was thick. Sinatra went on anyway. The interview was stiff, awkward pauses, forced laughter. Frank never came back. The Bob Hope problem. Bob Hope was comedy royalty. He'd been a star before Carson was born, but by the 1970s, something had changed. Hope would show up with cue cards, not just a few notes, full scripts. He'd interrupt Carson's monologue from the couch, not with spontaneous jokes, with prepared material he wanted to promote. The worst incident came in 1978. Hope was promoting his latest special. He brought a clip, standard procedure, but he also brought 17 minutes of material he wanted to do. The show was 90 minutes total. Hope wanted nearly 20% of it. Carson's jaw tightened. The audience couldn't see it, but the crew did. Hope started his routine without waiting for Carson's introduction. Just launched into it. Carson sat behind his desk, silent. His fingers drummed once, twice, then stopped. When Hope finally finished, Carson said 4 words, "We'll be right back." The show cut to commercial 3 minutes early. The next day, Carson called a meeting. New rule. No guest takes over the show, period. Hope kept getting booked, but less frequently. By 1983, he was down to once a year. By 1987, not at all. Charlie Callis goes too far. Charlie Callis was a comedian, rubber-faced, sound effects, physical comedy. He'd been on the show multiple times, always got laughs, but he had a problem. He couldn't stop. The 12th of December, 1982. Callis was the 3rd guest. His segment was supposed to run 7 minutes. It went 19. Carson tried to wrap it up. Multiple times, he'd lean forward the signal to guests that time was up. Callis ignored it. Carson touched his ear, the signal to the director that they needed to cut. Callis kept going. Finally, Carson stood up on his own show and walked behind his desk while his guest was still talking. Callis kept performing to dead air. The audience didn't know how to react. Some laughed nervously. Others went silent. The director finally cut to commercial. When they came back, Callis was gone. His nameplate had been removed from Carson's desk. He was never invited back. The Madonna Incident. The 31st of May, 1991. Madonna was at her peak. She'd done the show before, but this time was different. She'd been told to dress conservatively. This was network television, prime time. She showed up in a sheer top, no bra visible, but the suggestion was there. Carson's people asked her to change. She refused. They offered her a jacket. She threw it on the floor. The producer called Carson to his dressing room. They had a choice. cancel her appearance, or let her on, as Island Carson chose option 3. He'd do the interview but make it clear he wasn't happy. Watch the footage. Carson barely looks at her. His questions are perfunctory. No follow-ups, no banter. When Madonna tried to be flirtatious, her usual move, Carson shut it down. Let's talk about your album. Flat, emotionless. The interview ran 4 minutes. She was scheduled for 12. After the show, Carson told his staff, "Never again." And it was true. Madonna never returned to The Tonight Show while Carson hosted. She'd broken the cardinal rule, don't make the host look bad. The Wayne Newton confrontation. Wayne Newton thought he was bigger than the show. March 1980. He'd been doing well in Vegas, selling out shows, making millions. He arrived late, not 5 minutes. 45 minutes. The show had already started. They had to shuffle the entire lineup. When Newton finally arrived, he wasn't apologetic. He blamed traffic in Burbank at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday. Carson knew it was a lie. Everyone knew it was a lie, but they put him on anyway. The show must go on. That was Carson's rule. But there would be consequences. During the interview, Carson was ice. Every question had an edge. Nice of you to join us. I hope we're not keeping you from something important. I know you're very busy. The audience felt it. Newton felt it. He tried to joke his way out. Carson didn't laugh. Not once. But the real punishment came later. Newton was scheduled for 3 more appearances that year. All canceled. His publicist called. Carson wouldn't take the call. Newton tried to apologize through intermediaries. Carson's response was silence. It took 4 years before Newton was invited back, and only because the network insisted. Chevy Chase's fatal error. October 1985. Chevy Chase was guest hosting. Carson was on vacation. This was supposed to be an honor. Few people got to sit in Johnny's chair. Chase saw it differently. He thought he was auditioning for Carson's job. He changed the monologue format, added physical comedy, moved the desk, actually moved Carson's desk. The crew was horrified, but Chase was oblivious. He told reporters he was fixing the show, making it relevant for younger viewers. Carson heard about it in Europe. He called Fred de Cordova immediately. "What is he doing to my show?" Carson's voice was calm. That was worse than yelling. De Cordova tried to minimize it. But Carson had friends on the crew. They told him everything. When Carson returned, he spent the first 10 minutes of his monologue undoing Chase's changes. "I go away for a week and someone rearranges my furniture." The audience laughed. Chase was watching at home. He knew what it meant. He'd crossed a line. Chase was never asked to guest host again. His appearances as a regular guest dropped from 4 times a year to once, then none. In interviews years later, Chase still didn't understand what he'd done wrong. That was the problem. The Joan Rivers betrayal. This one hurt Carson personally. Joan Rivers had been his permanent guest host since 1983. She'd filled in for him 93 times. He'd mentored her, promoted her, made her career. Then, in 1986, she got an offer from Fox, her own show, direct competition to Carson. She took it without telling him. Carson found out from the newspaper. Not a call, not a letter. The newspaper. He felt betrayed, not because she took the job, because she didn't have the courtesy to tell him first. Carson's response was swift and total. Rivers was banned from The Tonight Show, not just as a host, as a guest, forever. Her photos were removed from the hallway. Her dressing room nameplate was thrown away. It was like she'd never existed. The ban lasted until Carson retired. Rivers tried to apologize, publicly, privately, through friends. Carson never responded, not once. When asked about her in interviews, he'd say, "I don't know who you're talking about." And he'd mean it. For Carson, Rivers was dead. Years later, Rivers would cry talking about it. The ban hurt her more than any failure, because Carson had been more than a boss. He'd been a friend, a father figure. And she'd lost him over ambition. The Tony Randall freeze. Tony Randall loved being on The Tonight Show. maybe too much. He'd been a guest over 100 times, but he had an annoying habit. He'd correct Carson on air about everything: grammar, pronunciation, facts about old movies, small things, but constantly. November 1987 was the breaking point. Carson was telling a story about Clark Gable. Randall interrupted. "Actually, Johnny, that was Spencer Tracy." Carson paused, smiled, but his eyes were cold. "Thank you, Tony." The conversation moved on, but something had changed. Randall's appearances started getting shorter, from 12 minutes to 8, then 5. The producers would tell him technical difficulties, timing issues, but Randall knew. He'd annoyed the king, and the king had a long memory. By 1990, Randall was down to 2 appearances a year, always in the third segment, never the featured guest. He'd sit on the couch and barely speak. Carson would acknowledge him briefly, then move on. It was public humiliation in slow motion. The George Carlin Problem. George Carlin was brilliant but unreliable. He'd been on the show dozens of times in the 60-second and early 70-second, clean cut, suit and tie. Then he changed, grew his hair, started doing drug material, got political. Carson didn't mind evolution. He minded unpredictability. The worst incident was in 1979. Carlin showed up high, not drunk, high. He could barely focus. His pupils were pinpricks. He was sweating through his shirt. The producers wanted to cancel his appearance. Carson said no, let America see him. The interview was a disaster. Carlin rambled, lost his train of thought, laughed at nothing. Carson kept it professional, but he was furious. After the show, he told his staff, "That's the last time." It wasn't a complete ban, but Carlin's appearances became rare, once every few years instead of multiple times, and always with conditions. Arrive early, meet with producers first. Prove he was sober. Carlin complained it was unfair. Carson didn't care. The Burt Reynolds situation. Burt Reynolds and Carson were friends, real friends, golf partners, dinner companions. Then Reynolds got bigger than movies, started believing his own press, showed up to tapings with demands. Special lighting, approval of camera angles, his own makeup team. The breaking point came in 1981. Reynolds was promoting a new film. He arrived with 20 people, entourage, publicists, bodyguards. They took over the green room. Other guests had nowhere to sit. Reynolds didn't care. He was Burt Reynolds. During the interview, Reynolds kept plugging the movie. Every answer led back to it. Carson tried to steer elsewhere. Reynolds brought it back. Again and again. Carson's smile got tighter, his laugh more forced. The audience could feel the tension. After that night, their friendship cooled. Reynolds still appeared on the show, but it was different, professional, distant. The golf games stopped. The dinners ended. Reynolds later said he never understood what went wrong. That was the problem. He'd gotten too big to see it. The Jim Carrey incident. Jim Carrey was new to the show in 1983, a young comic, eager, maybe too eager. He'd prepared 20 minutes of material for a 5-minute spot. Carson gave him the signal to wrap up. Carrey ignored it or didn't see it. Either way, he kept going. Carson stood up, walked over to Carrey, put his hand on his shoulder. "That's great, Jim. We'll have you back." It looked friendly on camera, but Carrey felt the grip, firm, almost painful. The message was clear. You're done. Carrey wasn't invited back for 2 years. When he returned, he was different. Subdued, respectful. He'd learned the lesson. The show wasn't about the guests. It was about Carson. Always Carson. The Rich Little Rivalry. Rich Little was an impressionist. One of his impressions was Johnny Carson. It was good, too good. He'd do it on other shows, in Vegas, even on The Tonight Show itself. At first, Carson laughed. Then he stopped laughing. The problem wasn't the impression. It was what Little did with it. He'd make jokes Carson would never make, take positions Carson didn't hold. People couldn't tell the difference. They'd think Carson had said things he hadn't. In 1984, Carson had enough. He called Little to his dressing room. Nobody knows exactly what was said, but Little stopped doing the impression completely. When asked why, he'd say, "Johnny asked me not to." That was it. Little's appearances dropped off, from 6 times a year to 2, then 1. By 1987, none. He'd broken an unspoken rule. Don't imitate the king in the king's court. The Andrew Dice Clay ban. Andrew Dice Clay was controversial, vulgar, offensive, but he was popular. The network wanted him on. Carson didn't. They compromised. Clay would appear, but with restrictions. No nursery rhymes, no women jokes. Keep it clean. May 1989. Clay agreed to the terms, then broke them. Within 30 seconds, he launched into his routine, the dirty one. The producers were screaming in Carson's ear. Cut to commercial. Carson didn't. He let Clay finish, then destroyed him. That was interesting. That's all Carson said. No laugh, no smile. Just those 3 words. The audience was silent. Clay tried to recover. Made another joke. Carson stared at him. "We'll be right back." Commercial. When they returned, Clay was gone. Not just from the stage, from the building. Security had escorted him out during the break. Carson never mentioned him again. Ever. When other guests brought up Clay's name, Carson would change the subject. Immediately. The Helen Reddy mistake. Helen Reddy was a singer. "I Am Woman" was her hit. She'd been on the show multiple times. Always professional. Until 1976. She'd had a dispute with her label. Wanted to use The Tonight Show to make a statement. Carson said no. This wasn't the place for that. Reddy agreed. Then did it anyway. During her performance, she stopped mid-song, started talking about artistic freedom, contract disputes. The cameras kept rolling, but Carson was livid. You could see it. His hand gripped his coffee mug so tight his knuckles were white. She finished the song. Carson thanked her, coldly. She was never invited back. Her people called, wrote letters, apologized. Nothing. Carson's ban was absolute. She'd used his show for her agenda. Unforgivable. The Joey Bishop jealousy. Joey Bishop had been part of the Rat Pack. He'd had his own talk show. It failed, but he couldn't let go. Every time he was on Carson, he'd make suggestions. "You know what would work better? When I had my show. Have you thought about trying?" Carson tolerated it. For a while, Bishop was from the old days, deserved respect, but it got worse. Bishop would critique Carson's monologue. On air. That joke would have been funnier if the audience would laugh nervously. Carson wouldn't laugh at all. The final straw came in 1981. Bishop actually tried to take over the interview, started asking questions of the other guests from the couch, like he was co-hosting. Carson shut it down. "Joey, you're a guest here." Simple, devastating. Bishop's appearances ended. Not officially, but the invitation stopped coming. When asked why, Carson's people would say, "Scheduling conflicts." Every time. For 10 years. Bishop knew. Everyone knew. Raymond Burr's fatal mistake. Raymond Burr was Perry Mason, Ironside, television royalty, but he had a secret, multiple secrets, stories about his past that weren't true, dead wives who never existed, children who were never born. Carson found out. Everyone in Hollywood knew. But Burr kept telling the stories. On the show in 1985, Burr started one of his tales about his son who died. Carson knew it was false. The audience didn't. Carson had a choice: expose him or enable him. He chose neither. He changed the subject. Abruptly. Obviously. Burr tried to return to the story. Carson changed the subject again and again. It became awkward, painful. Burr finally got the message, but the damage was done. He'd put Carson in an impossible position. Burr was never banned, but his appearances became rare, and when he did appear, Carson kept it superficial. Movies, television, nothing personal, ever. The message was clear: lie somewhere else. The Don Rickles exception. Don Rickles insulted everyone. That was his act. He insulted Carson constantly. Called him cheap, boring. Said his marriage wouldn't last. Said his tennis game was terrible. Any other guest would have been banned. But Rickles was different. Because Rickles understood something others didn't. The insults were the act, but the respect was real. After every appearance, Rickles would go to Carson's dressing room privately. Thank him. Genuinely. You're the best, Johnny. I mean it. Carson valued that. The private respect mattered more than the public ribbing, so Rickles could do anything, say anything. He'd earned it. By understanding what others didn't, The Tonight Show was Carson's house, and in Carson's house, you showed respect, even if the audience never saw it. The Eddie Murphy tension. Eddie Murphy was the biggest star in comedy by 1984. Saturday Night Live, Beverly Hills Cop, he was untouchable. Or so he thought. His first Tonight Show appearance was scheduled for 12 minutes. Murphy brought his own director, his own camera operator, wanted to shoot his own angles for his personal archive. Carson's team said no. Murphy pushed, said other shows let him do it. Carson appeared in Murphy's dressing room. Rare. Carson never visited guests before the show. This is The Tonight Show, he said. We do things one way, mine. Murphy backed down, but he was cold during the interview. One-word answers. No energy. Carson played it perfectly. Kept asking questions. Let Murphy hang himself with silence. The audience felt it. Murphy looked petulant, childish. His people called the next day. Wanted to apologize. To do a makeup appearance. Carson's response, we'll call you. They never did. The John Davidson problem. John Davidson thought he was Carson's successor. He'd guest hosted 17 times. The network loved him. Clean cut, safe, boring, but reliable. Davidson started telling people he had the inside track, that Carson had personally chosen him. Carson heard about it. He hadn't chosen anyone, wouldn't until he was ready. And that wasn't now. Davidson kept talking to reporters, to other hosts, even hinted at it during his guest appearances. When I'm sitting in that chair permanently, he'd say it like a joke. Carson wasn't laughing. January 1983. Davidson was scheduled to guest host for a week. Monday went fine. Tuesday, he rearranged the set, added plants, changed the backdrop color slightly. Wednesday, he mentioned his vision for the show's future. On air. Carson was in Malibu, watching. He called the network president at home. At midnight. Thursday morning, Davidson arrived to find his hosting duties had been cut short. Technical difficulties, they said. Carson would be returning early. Davidson never guest hosted again. When Leno and Letterman were being considered as successors, Davidson's name wasn't even mentioned. He'd eliminated himself years earlier. The Robin Williams chaos. Robin Williams was manic energy incarnate, brilliant, unpredictable, exhausting. His first appearances were electric. The audience loved him. Carson tolerated him. But Williams couldn't stay in his chair. He'd jump up, do impressions, take over the other guests' stories, turn everything into his performance. September 1981. Williams was the second guest. He interrupted the first guest 18 times, counted later by the show's producer. 18. Carson's patience was visible. His pen clicking, his jaw clenching. During commercial, Carson whispered something to Williams. Nobody heard what, but Williams sat still for the rest of the show, completely still, like a scolded child. Williams kept getting booked. He was too popular to ban, but his segments got shorter, and he was never the first guest again, always second or third, less time to dominate. Carson would introduce him with warnings disguised as jokes. Please welcome, if we can contain him, Robin Williams. The audience laughed. Williams got the message. The Zsa Zsa Gabor disaster. June 1989. Zsa Zsa Gabor brought her cat. Nobody told her to bring a cat. The producers explicitly said no animals unless approved. She brought it anyway. In a diamond-studded carrier. The cat was Persian, white, worth $40,000, she claimed. It hissed at Carson during the introduction. Carson hated surprises, especially furry ones, but he stayed professional until the cat jumped onto his desk, knocked over his coffee mug, the one he'd used for 15 years. It shattered. Gabor laughed. Macho doesn't like coffee. She named the cat Macho. Carson's response was measured. How nice. 2 words. Ice cold. He continued the interview. Never acknowledged the cat again, even when it meowed. Even when it walked across his papers. Gabor tried to make it part of the act. Carson refused to engage. 7 minutes later, she was done. The shortest interview she'd ever had on the show. The cleanup took place during commercial. The staff swept up the mug pieces. Carson never mentioned it, but Gabor was never invited back. Her publicist called weekly for 3 months. The answer was always the same. We're booked.
I expected it.
Yeah.
I expected he would go, but I don't know, when it happens, it's still tremendous.
Which Hollywood legends could make Mel Brooks, comedy's happiest director, absolutely miserable? The answer includes 6 stars you'd never expect. Broadway Battle with Zero, Mostel. The trouble began in rehearsal halls, not on film sets. In the mid-1960s, Mel Brooks was best known for writing gags for television, but he was hungry for something bigger. He had crafted The Producers, a story that was as outrageous as it was risky, and he needed a performer who could carry it with raw force. That answer was Zero Mostel, Broadway royalty, with credits in Fiddler on the Roof and A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. Mostel was already a legend, famous for both brilliance and volatility. Getting him was easy compared to directing him. Mostel carried a reputation that terrified stage managers. He was famous for tearing up scripts, improvising entire scenes, and refusing to take orders from anyone he thought beneath him. Brooks, still in his early 30s, walked into the project with excitement, but quickly discovered he had signed up for war. People present at rehearsals described daily standoffs. Brooks would explain pacing, punchlines, and blocking. Mostel would listen for a moment, then barrel through the script as if none of it mattered. He hated limits. He thrived on chaos. Once, after Brooks corrected a delivery, Mostel stared him down and mocked him in front of the cast, asking if the kid writer had ever directed anything worth seeing. The insult stung, but Brooks fired back with quick jokes to keep the room from collapsing. The tension never fully let up. Some nights ended with Brooks going home exhausted, telling friends Mostel was both brilliant and unbearable. The actor could be magnetic, but also destructive. He would hold court with wild stories, then turn around and lash out at anyone who challenged him. Cast members tiptoed between admiration and fear. Chaos on the producer's set. The shift from stage rehearsals to the film version of The Producers in 1967 didn't calm things down. If anything, the fights got louder. Now, Brooks was not just a writer, but a first-time director, facing the cameras in the full pressure of a movie set. Mostel, cast as Max Bialystock, walked in with the same reputation that had rattled Broadway. He was a star who believed rules didn't apply to him. From day one, the mood was tense. Brooks needed strict timing to make his farce land on screen. Mostel preferred to bulldoze through takes. Crew members recalled Brooks trying to call cut, only for Mostel to keep shouting lines and stomping around the set. Sometimes the actor would flat out refuse to redo a scene the way Brooks wanted. The imbalance was clear. Brooks had the title of director, but Mostel's personality dominated the room. The biggest blow-ups happened over improvisation. Brooks wrote the script with precision, but Mostel constantly went off the page. He would invent new lines, sometimes funny, sometimes not, and then insist they stay in. Brooks tried to argue, pointing out that the jokes only worked if the rhythm held. Mostel fired back that he, not Brooks, knew what would make audiences laugh. Their shouting could be heard across the soundstage. Other cast members felt the tension. Gene Wilder, making his breakthrough as Leo Bloom, later admitted he was terrified of Mostel. During one famous scene, Wilder's hysterical panic was real. He said he feared both the character of Max and the actor playing him. Brooks encouraged Wilder to channel that fear into his performance, and it worked on screen, but the method was born from chaos, not design. Despite the clashes, the shoot was completed, though not without scars. Brooks often left set looking drained, muttering that directing Mostel was like wrestling a bear. He privately joked that his real directing credit should read, "Survived Zero Mostel." The final cut captured lightning in a bottle, but Brooks never softened his stance. Years later, he still described Mostel as brilliant and impossible, proof that the nightmare never faded, even after the film won him an Oscar for Best Screenplay. Clash with Peter Sellers. By the early 1970s, Brooks was no longer just a rookie director. The producers had earned him an Oscar, and Get Smart had proved he could create hits. His next big move was Blazing Saddles, 1974, a project that would push comedy into territory no studio had dared before. For the lead, Brooks wanted star power. That's when he turned to Peter Sellers. Sellers was fresh off his success in the Pink Panther films, known worldwide as Inspector Clouseau. On paper, he was a dream choice, a global name with unmatched comic timing. In practice, he became another nightmare. Brooks arranged meetings to discuss the role of Sheriff Bart, but those sessions spiraled quickly. Sellers arrived late, demanded constant changes, and questioned whether Brooks even understood what he was making. He treated the young director as an amateur and made it clear he expected control. The biggest sticking point was the script. Brooks, working with co-writers Richard Pryor, Andrew Bergman, Norman Steinberg, and Alan Uger, had honed the material carefully. Sellers flipped through the pages, laughed at some jokes, then dismissed others as beneath him. He wanted rewrites to center the film more on his style. Brooks refused. The project wasn't meant to be polished English satire. It was raw, brash, and deeply American. Sellers didn't see it that way. Their tension spilled into the press. Sellers made sly remarks in interviews, hinting that Hollywood had lost its sense of class. Brooks caught wind of those comments and saw them as direct shots at his film. He quickly realized the partnership would never work. The two parted ways before shooting began. Looking back, Brooks admitted that Sellers was brilliant but impossible. The line summed up the experience perfectly. Sellers could elevate a role to pure genius, but only on his terms. Collaboration was nearly impossible. In the end, the role of Sheriff Bart went to Cleavon Little, and the film became a classic without Sellers anywhere near it. Brooks never tried to cast him again. The clash confirmed what many in the industry already knew. Sellers was a comic genius who could destroy a production as easily as he could save one. For Brooks, it was a close call that turned into a lasting grudge. Sellers' reputation confirmed. Brooks wasn't the only one to find Peter Sellers unbearable. By the 1970s, the actor's reputation across Hollywood and London was infamous. Directors, writers, and co-stars all carried stories of blown tempers, broken sets, and sudden walkouts. For Brooks, the failed Blazing Saddles talks only confirmed what many already warned him about. Spike Milligan, one of Sellers' longtime collaborators from The Goon Show, often described him as mad, bad, and brilliant. He loved his talent, but admitted the man could derail a project with one mood swing. Stanley Kubrick, who directed Sellers in Strangelove, revealed that he had to shoot countless takes because Sellers would refuse to repeat a performance, claiming he never acted the same way twice. The results were dazzling, but the process left Kubrick drained. Those stories traveled fast, and Brooks listened. He had entered his meeting with Sellers knowing he was difficult, but experiencing it firsthand locked in his judgment. Unlike Kubrick, Brooks didn't have the patience or the budget to indulge an actor who demanded full control. Comedy, as Brooks built it, thrived on timing, structure, and discipline. Sellers' style was chaos. Even other comedians had trouble with him. Peter O'Toole, who worked with Sellers on What's New Pussycat, admitted he almost quit the film because of Sellers' constant outbursts. Woody Allen, who also appeared in that project, later said Sellers treated him with cold contempt. The pattern was clear: brilliance on screen, misery off it. Brooks, by contrast, found harmony with actors who trusted his direction. Gene Wilder became his closest collaborator, giving performances that landed because he worked hand-in-hand with Brooks instead of against him. The contrast between Wilder's cooperation and Sellers' arrogance couldn't have been clearer. For Brooks, it was proof that no amount of stardom was worth the cost of chaos. He later remarked, "Peter Sellers was a genius, but impossible." The industry agreed. Strained ties with Woody Allen. By the mid-1970s, Mel Brooks and Woody Allen were two of the biggest comedy names to come out of New York. They both came from the same scene, working clubs and writing for television, but they could not have been more different. Brooks thrived on loud, outrageous satire. Allen leaned into quiet, neurotic characters and intellectual humor. The clash of styles created distance, and Brooks made no effort to hide that he didn't care for Allen's approach. The divide showed up in interviews. While Brooks praised friends like Carl Reiner and Neil Simon, he often brushed past Allen's name. When asked about him in the late 1970s, Brooks joked that Allen was allergic to warmth. It was a cutting remark that drew laughs but made the tension clear. Allen rarely mentioned Brooks at all, but when critics compared the producers to Allen's early films like Bananas or Sleeper, the rivalry only grew. Insiders said Brooks saw Allen as pretentious. He thought the comedian looked down on broad comedy and considered himself above slapstick. Brooks, who built entire careers out of pratfalls and absurd gags, resented that attitude. He liked comedians who played for the crowd, not critics. For him, Allen's cool detachment felt like a rejection of the kind of comedy Brooks loved most. The feeling extended to casting. Brooks never asked Allen to appear in any of his films, even though Allen was a bankable star by the mid-70 seconds. The choice was deliberate. Brooks preferred to surround himself with players like Madeline Kahn, Dom DeLuise, and Gene Wilder actors who embraced chaos and energy, not restraint. Brooks's jab about Allen being all neurosis, no warmth, summed up how he saw him both on screen and off. To Brooks, Allen's characters mirrored the man, closed off, self-absorbed, and distant. The two shared the same city and the same industry, but never crossed paths professionally. Cold War of comedy styles. The 1970s comedy scene in New York and Hollywood often turned into a debate between two camps: the broad, outrageous style of Mel Brooks and the cerebral, self-referential humor of Woody Allen. Critics loved to set them against each other, even when neither man wanted the comparison. Brooks leaned into farce, slapstick, and absurdity. Allen leaned into neurosis, philosophy, and irony. To audiences, both styles worked, but for Brooks, the contrast only hardened his dislike. Reviews of Blazing Saddles in 1974 and Young Frankenstein later that year praised Brooks for pushing boundaries. At the same time, Allen released Sleeper and Love and Death. The press framed it as two visions of comedy, one wild and populist, the other restrained and intellectual. Brooks, never shy with words, rejected the idea that comedy had to be smart to be valuable. He reminded interviewers that his films were meant to make people laugh loudly, not stroke their chins in thought. Industry insiders noticed how Brooks would happily promote colleagues like Carl Reiner, but kept Allen at arm's length. The distance wasn't just personal, it was cultural. Brooks believed comedy should be inclusive, aimed at everyone in the theater. Allen's films, filled with references to Russian literature and European art films, struck Brooks as narrow and elitist. Friends of Brooks recalled him grumbling that Allen represented everything he didn't want comedy to become. Brooks liked to say that laughter should hit the gut, not the intellect. That line, often repeated in his circles, was understood as a swipe at Allen's work. The tension wasn't limited to print. Award season often put their names side by side. Brooks's Young Frankenstein earned Oscar nominations, while Allen's Annie Hall swept the Academy just a few years later. The rivalry only deepened as Allen became the critical darling. Brooks continued to command box office success, which meant the battle was as much about audience versus critic as it was about style. For Brooks, the Cold War never needed a direct fight. Mel meets Orson Welles. By the late 1970s, Brooks was powerful enough in Hollywood to hire anyone he wanted. That included legends who usually worked on their own terms. When he began shaping History of the World, Part 1 in 1981, Brooks needed a voice to match the film's grand parody of history. His choice was Orson Welles, the towering figure behind Citizen Kane. The move seemed perfect. Welles's voice could give absurd scenes the weight of epic drama. What Brooks didn't expect was how difficult it would be to control him. Welles had a reputation that stretched across decades. Brilliant, arrogant, and uncompromising, he was known to bend or break productions to his will. Brooks quickly learned that narration work with Welles meant surrendering a large share of control. In the recording booth, Brooks tried to give direction. Welles ignored most of it. If Brooks suggested a different tempo, Welles dismissed it. If Brooks asked for another take, Welles snapped that his first read was all anyone needed. Stories from the sessions became Hollywood gossip. Welles, who had been struggling with health and money, demanded special treatment. Crew members recalled that he insisted on steak dinners and fine wine before recording, often delaying call times until his requests were met. Brooks joked privately that feeding Welles cost almost as much as hiring him. Yet when Welles finally spoke into the microphone, the results were undeniable. His deep, commanding voice gave Brooks's jokes an extra punch. The narration made even the silliest gags feel monumental. That was exactly why Brooks had chased him in the first place. The problem was that every line came with a battle. Brooks said later that you don't direct Orson Welles, you survive him. The collaboration ended with Brooks both impressed and frustrated. He got the sound he needed, but the process reinforced a rule he had already learned with Zero Mostel and Peter Sellers. Some geniuses are not worth the pain. Why Brooks couldn't stand Welles. The recording sessions for History of the World, Part 1 gave Brooks everything he needed to know about Orson Welles. Once the film wrapped, Brooks was clear. Welles had the voice of a giant, but the temperament of a tyrant. The tension from those sessions followed Brooks for years whenever the subject of Welles came up. Welles's demands became infamous. Crew members told stories about him refusing to step into the booth until a steak dinner and a bottle of wine were provided. Others recalled him cutting sessions short if he didn't feel like working, leaving Brooks scrambling to finish pages on schedule. These antics were not unusual for Welles. By the late 1970s, he was known for showing up to commercials and narration jobs more interested in the perks than the work. Brooks, who thrived on fast-moving sets and disciplined comedy, saw it as arrogance that wasted time and money. What grated Brooks most was Welles's refusal to be directed. Brooks prided himself on shaping every beat of a performance. With Welles, there was no chance. He would give one booming read and declare it finished. If Brooks asked for another take, Welles either ignored him or delivered the same line louder, daring anyone to argue. Brooks later quipped that directing Welles was like standing in a hurricane with a microphone. The final narration was powerful, but Brooks never softened. In interviews, he praised the sound of Welles's voice, but stopped short of calling the experience positive. The clash became another example of Brooks's private blacklist, the group of actors and stars he admired on screen but refused to endure again. Industry voices backed him up. Welles's work habits had frustrated countless others. Charlton Heston once described him as brilliant but exhausting, and studio executives whispered that hiring him late in his career came with endless delays. Brooks simply added his name to the long list of colleagues who considered Welles untouchable. For Brooks, the lesson was sharp. Even legends could be poison in the wrong context. Welles gave his movie the grandeur it needed, but Brooks walked away certain he would never work with him again. Jerry Lewis personality clash. By the 1980s, Brooks was an Oscar-winning director with box office hits behind him, but his opinion of Jerry Lewis had never improved. Their paths had crossed back in television days, when Lewis was half of the Martin and Lewis comedy duo. Lewis's talent for slapstick and physical comedy was undeniable, but his offstage behavior rubbed Brooks the wrong way. Where Brooks prized collaboration and quick wit, Lewis carried an ego that made him difficult to stomach. Writers who worked in those years recalled that Lewis treated staff with open disdain. He believed performers were the real stars and writers were replaceable. Brooks, who built his reputation in writers' rooms, saw that attitude as an insult. The resentment grew as Lewis's fame soared and his reputation for arrogance became part of his public image. By the time Brooks was directing films like Silent Movie and High Anxiety, Lewis was already considered past his prime in Hollywood, but still carried the weight of his legend. At parties, Brooks and Lewis occasionally ended up in the same room. Friends said the tension was obvious. Brooks had a way of joking with almost anyone, but with Lewis, the jokes turned barbed. He once remarked that Lewis couldn't take a laugh unless he made it himself, a dig at the star's inability to share the spotlight. The divide was professional as well as personal. Brooks enjoyed actors who gave themselves over to his chaos, who trusted the director to shape their performance. Lewis, by contrast, wanted to control every element. On his own films, he wrote, directed, starred, and even oversaw editing. Brooks saw that as the opposite of fun. To him, it was suffocating, a one-man show that left no room for teamwork. By the 1990s, Lewis had softened in public interviews, but Brooks never hid his disdain. When asked about great comedians of the 20th century, Brooks would praise Sid Caesar, Carl Reiner, and Gene Wilder, but he rarely mentioned Lewis at all. Brooks's final list, at 99. As Mel Brooks entered his late 90s, he had little reason to hold back. He had collected every major award, outlived most of his peers, and watched generations of comedians study his work. At interviews and events, he began speaking more openly about the handful of people he never liked working with. Unlike most of Hollywood, where grudges are hidden or softened, Brooks laid his out plainly. Zero Mostel topped the list. Brooks admitted more than once that Mostel was brilliant but exhausting, a man who made every day on the producers feel like combat. He credited him with comedy that couldn't be duplicated, then reminded anyone listening that he would never go through that again. It was admiration mixed with raw frustration, unsoftened by time. Peter Sellers was next. Brooks described him as genius but impossible, echoing what so many directors had already learned. Sellers' demands during their Blazing Saddles discussions convinced Brooks to walk away before disaster struck. At nearly 100, Brooks had no regrets about cutting ties with him early. Woody Allen remained another sore point. Brooks never forgave what he saw as Allen's pretentious detachment. His line that Allen was all neurosis, no warmth, followed him for decades, a clear sign that the dislike was genuine and lasting. Orson Welles joined the group for his impossible ego during the narration of History of the World, Part 1. Brooks repeated that you don't direct Orson Welles, you survive him, a story that audiences still laughed at even as Brooks insisted it was true. Jerry Lewis made the cut as well. Brooks resented his contempt for writers and his need to dominate every project. For a man who built his career in writers' rooms and ensemble casts, Lewis embodied everything Brooks couldn't tolerate in comedy. Finally, Brooks included Frank Sinatra. Though not a direct collaborator, Sinatra's dismissal of Brooks's humor and his treatment of writers left a bad impression. Brooks carried that dislike for decades, often citing him as an example of arrogance he couldn't stand. By 99, Brooks's list of 6 names, Mostel, Sellers, Allen, Welles, Lewis, and Sinatra, was set. He offered it not as gossip but as blunt truth from a man who had nothing left to lose.
Most people believe that being a part of Hollywood is a dream come true. From the flamboyant lives of celebrities to the glitz and glam that is often displayed during red carpet events, people are willing to do anything to experience this kind of life. However, not many people know that Hollywood is not what it appears to be. In fact, beyond the illusion of perfection are dark secrets that have been buried and swept under the rug for decades. Over the years, several rumors have been circulated about the dark side of Hollywood. If you ever wondered if the rumors are true, you're about to find out, because this video will uncover the dark and ugly side of Hollywood. Brace yourself. They make things disappear. Have you come across those twisted and ruthless individuals that work with criminal bodies in action movies? You know, the ones they call to make things disappear. Well, what if I told you that these people are not just fictional characters? What if I told you that Hollywood has real-life fixers and they will stop at nothing to make scandals disappear? In November 2002, certain information came to light as it was revealed that an alleged Hollywood fixer, Anthony Pellicano, was caught and brought to justice. He was said to have been involved in the intimidation and threats that a certain journalist, Anita M. Bush, was facing. Apparently, she was one of the journalists who was bold enough to write investigative stories about the film industry and Hollywood super agent Michael Ovitz. At the time, she was also working on an alleged story about mob money being used to finance a film that Steven Seagal starred in. She must have been on the verge of uncovering a dark secret because when she began to dig up information, she started receiving life threats. She was warned to stop digging for information, and it was clear that whoever was sending these threats was trying to protect a powerful person or powerful people in the industry. After a series of investigations were carried out, it was revealed that Anthony Pellicano was allegedly behind the threats she was receiving. Now, as shocking as this news was, this wasn't the first time that Hollywood was rumored to be operating with a set of individuals called fixers. During the silent era and golden age, it was rumored that the likes of Eddie Mannix and Howard Strickling were the fixers that were called whenever a star had a problem that needed to be fixed. When female stars like Lana Turner, Garland, and other MGM stars got pregnant out of wedlock, a fixer was assigned to make the pregnancy go away in order to protect the image of the star. Some male stars who were attracted to men were forced by the fixers to marry women so that the public would be deceived. Any star who refused to comply with a fixer's methods faced consequences that they couldn't recover from. It's been decades since the likes of Strickling rendered their services in Hollywood, and one would think that fixers no longer exist. Well, let's just say they are more secretive. Pellicano, who landed behind bars for his work as a fixer, is said to have helped the likes John McTiernan, Chris Rock, and Courtney Love. A documentary titled Sin Eater, The Crimes of Anthony Pellicano has been released, and it's a complete expose about this fixer's clandestine activities, the dark underbelly of Hollywood, and the lengths powerful people go to protect their image. The Curse of a Child Star. Over the years, Hollywood has managed to discover and groom some of the most talented child stars on the surface of the earth. Many of these child stars have graced screens over the years and proven to viewers that children are also capable of portraying characters excellently, but behind the smiles and starry eyes that these young stars bring to screens is a dark secret that has been kept buried for decades. From the days of Shirley Temple, there have been rumors about the dark things that child stars face behind the scenes. Although most of these allegations have swept under the rug, Shirley Temple's autobiography brought a lot of secrets out and confirmed what viewers were suspecting all along. Anyone who was a fan of Shirley Temple when she was a film star must have felt a strange feeling while watching her on screens. Although she was of preschool age, she was made to act weird roles with grown men, and some of the roles clearly sexualized her. However, the world was stuck with mere suspicions until she decided to unveil what happened in her autobiography. She didn't mince words, as she made it clear that she and her fellow child stars were being treated badly. In her words, if any of the preschool-age children misbehaved on set, they were locked in a windowless booth called the punishment box and be forced to sit on a solid block of ice for extended periods of time. She went on to reveal that she was often touched inappropriately and was terrorized by men behind the scenes. One can only imagine how terrified she must have been felt as she was going through all these at such a young age. But through it all, she had to still show up on screens, sing, dance, and be the bright-eyed actress that everyone loved and adored. In more recent years, several celebrities have found the courage to expose this dark side of the industry, revealing that they too went through a similar experience. It will surprise you to know that the beloved Macaulay Culkin, who made us laugh, cry, and scream through his role in Home Alone, was also abused. He revealed that when he was younger and still finding his footing in Hollywood, he was touched inappropriately by several celebrities. Sadly, just like every young actor who has gone through a similar experience, he didn't know how to get out of the situation, and what made it even worse was the fact that his own father treated him badly all through his career. But Culkin's and Temple's stories are just a few out of the many stories that show this dark side of the industry. In 2014, a Nickelodeon production assistant, Jason Michael Handy, was arrested for child abuse. This is proof that this is yet another dark truth that Hollywood has decided to keep hidden. Strategic collaborations with the paparazzi. Have you ever come across a video of a popular celebrity yelling at the paparazzi and warning them not to take pictures of them? Well, that's just one side of the coin. It is true that the paparazzi can be a relentless bunch of photographers who fight to get pictures of celebrities in different phases of their lives. However, these days, the paparazzi often work hand in hand with celebrities to showcase a certain reality to the media. In the words of a famous Manchester-based paparazzo, Aaron Parfit, "I think a lot of people are quite dumb about how it works. People think we are scumbags hanging out of trees, but these celebrities are ringing us. I've been on holiday with celebrities. Most of them are reality stars. We go to Spain, shoot 6 bikini sets, and stick them out throughout the month." Interestingly, this has remained a secret between celebrities. Interestingly, this practice didn't start recently. Old Hollywood stars were said to have posed for romantic pictures with co-stars, especially for upcoming romance movies. When these pictures were released, fans would get excited about their favorite stars being in a relationship, not knowing that these stars were faking it in order to get views for their upcoming movies. The price of perfection. In an industry where a person's perceived image is the bedrock of their fame, it is no surprise that celebrities go above and beyond to look perfect. But no one knows the lengths that they go in order to lose weight and look perfect for interviews and red carpet events, and the illness that follows this desperation for perfection. Over the years, female celebrities have done it all, from getting plastic surgeries done to subjecting themselves to strict diets, all in a bid to have the perfect figure. While the likes of Marilyn Monroe may have seemed perfect on the outside, not many people know that she struggled with an eating disorder for the most part of her life. One can only imagine the pressure she was under to maintain that slim waist and to remain a beauty standard for women all over the world. In more recent years, it has been revealed that eating disorders are becoming even more rampant in the industry. The actress Naomi Watts once revealed that she starved herself for days so that her outfit would look perfect for a red carpet event. Some celebrities have gone into depression as a result of one eating disorder or the other, and it is clear that this is yet another dark truth that is hidden behind the curtains of perfection in Hollywood. So when you see your favorite actresses smiling and posing for pictures at red carpet events, remember that some of them are struggling internally. Age is not just a number. Ageism is alive and well. These words spoken by Jane Fonda have raised concerns about a practice that the industry is guilty of. It appears that in the entertainment industry, particularly in Hollywood, remains a pervasive issue that affects both male and female actors, albeit in slightly different ways. However, the impact of ageism tends to be more pronounced for women, considering the fact that many female actresses start worrying as they approach 40 due to fears of dwindling opportunities for roles. This fear stems from the industry's obsession with youth and the notion that younger actors are more marketable and attractive to audiences. One significant aspect contributing to ageism in Hollywood is the industry's emphasis on physical appearance. Hollywood has long been criticized for its unrealistic beauty standards and its perpetuation of youth as the pinnacle of attractiveness. As a result, actresses, in particular, face immense pressure to maintain a youthful appearance as they age. This pressure often leads to actresses resorting to extreme measures, such as cosmetic surgery or rigorous diet and exercise regimens, to preserve their looks and remain competitive in the industry. But even with all these measures, age still creeps in. Jane Fonda, a veteran actress with decades of experience in Hollywood, has been outspoken about the prevalence of ageism in the industry. She has highlighted how actresses, even those with illustrious careers like herself, face discrimination and limited opportunities as they grow older. Fonda's own experiences are proof of the challenges older actresses encounter in Hollywood, despite their talent and accomplishments. The issue of ageism is further compounded by instances where actresses feel compelled to conceal their true age to avoid being overlooked for roles. Margot Robbie's experience, where rumors about her age prompted backlash, underscores the pressures actresses face to adhere to Hollywood's youth-centric standards. Robbie's decision to potentially misrepresent her age reflects the harsh reality that ageism can detrimentally impact an actress's career prospects. While there are exceptions like Meryl Streep who continue to thrive in Hollywood despite aging, their success does not negate the systemic issue of ageism in the industry. Streep's is because of her exceptional talent and versatility as an actress, rather than evidence that ageism is no longer prevalent. It's safe to say that the industry's fixation on youth and perfection perpetuates unrealistic standards and contributes to the marginalization of older actors. Is organized crime real? Back in the old days of Hollywood, there was a chilling incident that shook the town. A group of people barged into the house of an old Hollywood actor, Roman Polanski, and sadly, lives were lost that day. This was one of the tragic events that made people believe that organized crime was prevalent in the industry. More shocking discoveries have been made over the years, and it's clear that there is a high possibility that organized crime still has a grip on the industry. During the Golden Age, Frank Sinatra was said to be part of a shady group called the Rat Pack. The Rat Pack, led by Frank Sinatra, was the epitome of cool in Hollywood during the 1950s and 1960s. Sinatra himself was rumored to have had ties to the mafia, particularly through his friendship with figures like Sam Giancana. The Rat Pack's performances in Las Vegas were often attended by mobsters, adding fuel to the rumors. This made people believe that Hollywood was somehow intertwined with criminals. Some mysterious deaths have also led people to believe that there are indeed dark things happening in the industry. Throughout Hollywood's history, there have been mysterious deaths that some speculate could be linked to organized crime. Whether it's the unsolved murder of famous director William Desmond Taylor in 1922 or the suspicious circumstances surrounding the deaths of various actors and producers over the years, whispers of foul play have often circulated. You see, Hollywood has always had its share of rumors about connections between big stars and organized crime. There was this famous joint called the Trocadero, where celebs and big shots from movie studios would hang out, mingling with notorious gangsters like Mickey Cohen. Even after the golden age of Hollywood, whispers persisted about shady dealings with mobsters, extending into the 1970s. For instance, there was this movie called The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it was distributed by a company called Bryanston Pictures. Turns out this company had some connections to a mafia crime family. These stories might sound like something out of a movie themselves, but they were very real. As for whether any celebrities have spoken out about this, well, it's a bit hush-hush. Some might have hinted at it or mentioned it indirectly, but outright confirmation, that's hard to come by. Hollywood's history is full of strange and wild tales, and the ties between celebrities and organized crime are just one part of it. Animals are treated badly. In Hollywood, while many celebrities have championed animal rights causes, there have been disturbing reports suggesting that not everyone in the industry holds the same regard for animals' welfare. Unfortunately, there have been instances of animals being mistreated on the sets of movies, raising serious concerns about animal welfare in the entertainment industry. One notable animal abuse controversy occurred in 2017 during the production of A Dog's Purpose. A video surfaced showing a dog appearing to be forced into turbulent water during filming, sparking widespread outrage. However, it was later reported that the video had been edited to misrepresent the situation. Despite this clarification, the incident raised questions about the treatment of animals on film sets. The mistreatment of animals in Hollywood is not a recent phenomenon. Throughout the history of cinema, there have been instances of animal abuse, sometimes in the pursuit of realistic effects. For example, in the 1925 film Ben-Hur and many old-school westerns, horrifying horse falls were staged, endangering the animals involved. These controversies shed light on a dark aspect of the entertainment industry, where animals have sometimes been subjected to mistreatment for the sake of cinematic effects. While efforts have been made to improve animal welfare standards on film sets, these incidents prove that there is still work to be done when it comes to ensuring the safety and well-being of all animals involved in movie productions. Is lack of diversity still prevalent? Recently, a video of the African-American actress Taraji Henson surfaced the internet. In the video, she was crying profusely and talking about the fact that people of color are treated unfairly in the industry. There is no denying that lack of diversity is still a major issue in Hollywood. People of color are usually stereotyped as gangsters, drivers, while other minority groups are chosen to portray maids. It is clear that there is still a lack of diversity in Hollywood. One prominent actor who has spoken out about the lack of diversity in Hollywood is Viola Davis. Davis, who is African American, has been vocal about the limited opportunities for people of color in the industry. In her 2015 Emmy acceptance speech, she famously stated, "The only thing that separates women of color from anyone else is opportunity. You cannot win an Emmy for roles that are simply not there." Davis has highlighted the fact that roles for minorities often fall into stereotypical categories, limiting the range of characters they can portray and perpetuating harmful stereotypes. The lack of diversity in Hollywood not only limits the opportunities available to minority actors, but also perpetuates harmful stereotypes and reinforces systemic inequalities. When minority groups are only offered roles that fit narrow stereotypes, it reinforces the idea that they are only capable of portraying certain types of characters. This not only limits their career prospects, but also perpetuates harmful stereotypes that can contribute to discrimination and prejudice in society. Furthermore, when white actors are cast in roles that should be played by people of color, it further marginalizes minority groups and denies them opportunities to tell their own stories. This practice, known as whitewashing, erases the experiences and perspectives of people of color and perpetuates a narrative in which white voices are prioritized over others. It is essential for the industry to continue making efforts to be more inclusive and to provide opportunities for actors from all backgrounds to tell their own stories and represent the diverse world in which we live. The wild and dark parties are real. The notion of dark or notorious parties within Hollywood has indeed been a subject of speculation and controversy for decades. While it's common for celebrities to come together for social events and blow off steam, there have been persistent rumors and occasional revelations about the darker aspects of some of these gatherings. Heidi Fleiss, known as the Hollywood Madam, became infamous in the 1990s for her involvement in running a high-end prostitution ring catering to wealthy and influential clients, including many from the entertainment industry. Her arrest and subsequent revelations shed light on the underbelly of Hollywood's elite social scene, where substance abuse and exploitation were alleged to be prevalent. The notion of powerful figures exploiting their status and indulging in illicit activities is not confined to recent times. Throughout the history of Hollywood, there have been stories and scandals involving sex, drugs, and other forms of misconduct at parties attended by the rich and famous. From the golden age of Hollywood to the present day, tales of debauchery and excess have circulated, sometimes whispered and sometimes exposed in the media. Recent allegations surrounding figures like P. Diddy only add fuel to these long-standing rumors. While it's important to approach such allegations with a critical eye and recognize that not all social gatherings in Hollywood are characterized by misconduct, the persistence of these stories proves that there may indeed be a darker side to the glitz and glamour of Tinseltown. Pep pills and substances on set. To the rest of the world, famous actors and actresses are a set of people who have proven to be talented and brought some of the best Hollywood movies to life. While this narrative is true, some of them have done shocking things on set in order to be able to create mind-blowing movies. It will amaze you to know that some of your favorite actors have been dependent on substances to be able to bring their roles to life. And what is even more shocking about this is the fact that these substances are made available on some movie sets. It has been rumored that some stars have been coerced to take these substances against their will. One of the dark truths that has remained hidden in Hollywood for a while is the illegal substances that are given to actors and actresses to enhance their performance. Some of the movies that became a huge success were created by actors who had to take certain substances before acting. Perhaps this is why a lot of movie stars are addicted to these substances. Back in the day, Judy Garland was said to be one of the many stars who was constantly pumped with all kinds of drugs before her performances and even interviews. Sure, she was able to entertain her fans and make her studio a lot of money, but it came at a price, a lifelong addiction. The talented actor Dennis Quaid is one of the few actors who has opened up about this secret in Hollywood. According to him, cocaine was allegedly listed in the budget of some of the movies he appeared in. However, this purchase was disguised as petty cash so that no one would find out that actors were taking these substances on set.
She knew Howard Hughes before the crash helmet, had a front row seat to Jeff Chandler's secrets, and Rock Hudson, Mamie Van Doren, says she saw the truth behind the tux. Now, she's naming names and she's not sugarcoating a thing. Early Hollywood ambitions. Joan Lucille Olander was just 9 when her family moved from South Dakota to Los Angeles in 1942. It didn't take long for her to dream bigger than school plays. She watched Jean Harlow movies, saw the buzz around Lana Turner's soda fountain discovery, and decided she wanted that life too. By her teens, Joan had bleached her hair platinum and practiced her walk in front of the mirror. She wasn't waiting around to be discovered. She entered beauty contests instead. In 1949, at just 16, she won Miss 8-Ball and Miss Palm Springs. The titles weren't huge, but the exposure was. One of her prizes, a screen test at RKO Studios. That's where Howard Hughes took notice. Hughes, already deep in the Hollywood scene, invited her for a meeting. She showed up, confident and blunt. At one point, he asked if she was a virgin. She fired back, "You'll never know, Mr. Hughes." That line stuck. Hughes reportedly laughed, impressed. That single comeback, part sass, part self-defense, landed her a contract at RKO. Joan was underage, untrained, and mostly uncredited at first, but she had presence. She appeared in background roles in films like His Kind of Woman and 2 Tickets to Broadway. She studied actresses like Harlow and Monroe, but she wasn't trying to be either. She wanted to be sharper, bolder, less sweet. By the end of the decade, Joan had more on her resume than most girls her age. She also had industry attention and a reputation for speaking her mind. In a town that liked quiet girls who smiled on cue, she made it clear she had her own plans. That attitude would take her far. But it also set her apart from the other starlets Universal was grooming. She wasn't just pretty, she was sharp. And in the next chapter, she'd get a new name, a new studio, and a very specific mission: become Universal's answer to Marilyn Monroe. Universal signs Mamie. On the 20th of January, 1953, the same day Dwight D. Eisenhower was sworn in as president, Universal Studios gave Joan Lucille Olander a new identity. They signed her to a contract and gave her a name that sounded like a headline: Mamie Van Doren. Mamie came from the First Lady, Mamie Eisenhower. Van Doren was borrowed from the intellectual Van Doren family to make her sound classy. Universal didn't want a fresh face. They wanted a weapon. Marilyn Monroe had just exploded at Fox. Columbia had Kim Novak. Mamie was their counterpunch. The studio bleached her hair again, upped her makeup, and told her to be sexier, funnier, and louder. Mamie didn't object. She wanted to work, and she wasn't interested in being subtle. She started with small roles. In Forbidden, 1953, she had a bit part. In The All-American, 1953, she got more attention. She played the seductive Code next to Tony Curtis, showing she could do more than just stand around looking pretty. Mamie took acting classes between shoots and trained with coaches, trying to prove she had more going on than just her looks. Behind the scenes, Universal pushed her into the spotlight. They staged publicity photos, lined up press interviews, and crafted stories to make her sound like a playful blonde bombshell with brains. Mamie played along but added her own twist. She didn't flirt softly or play dumb. She made bold jokes, called out bad behavior, and didn't wait to be asked for her opinion. She knew the Monroe comparison would follow her everywhere, but she wasn't trying to be a clone. Monroe was soft. Mamie was sharper. She called herself a female James Dean. That kind of line didn't sit well with some in the studio, but it stuck. By the end of 1953, Mamie Van Doren wasn't just a name on a contract. She was a rising brand, and Universal had big plans. They wanted her at premieres and gossip columns, and most importantly, in front of the camera. She was about to get her first big red carpet test. Universal set her up on a public date with one of their biggest stars, someone with secrets the studio didn't want out. Rock Hudson date. In February 1953, Mamie Van Doren got her first real taste of Hollywood spin. Universal paired her with Rock Hudson for the 10th Golden Globe Awards on the 26th of February. It wasn't about romance, but a photo op. The studio wanted buzz, and Rock was one of their most bankable stars. Mamie was excited. She knew who he was. Tall, handsome, rising fast. What she didn't know, at least not officially, was the gossip swirling behind the scenes. In the 1950s, being openly gay in Hollywood could destroy a career, so Rock played the game. He went on arranged dates, he smiled for the cameras, and Mamie was the perfect blonde to match him. The night went smoothly. They posed together, waved to fans, and did everything the studio expected. But Mamie says that when he dropped her off, he tried to push the script further. He asked to come in for coffee. She agreed. He made a move, started fumbling with her crinoline dress. She says it was awkward, even a little funny. Nothing happened. Years later, Mamie didn't hold back when she retold the story. She insisted Rock wasn't bisexual. He tried, she said, but it wasn't there. Not even close. In her eyes, the whole date was for show. She didn't mind. She'd played along, gotten the exposure, and kept her boundaries. To be clear, Rock Hudson never publicly confirmed his sexuality during his lifetime. He maintained the studio-manufactured image for decades. But Mamie wasn't the only one who saw through it early on. Industry insiders whispered, reporters speculated, but no one dared print it. That night didn't hurt her career. If anything, it made her seem more in demand. She looked like the kind of girl who dated big stars, and she played the part well. But off-camera, Mamie was already breaking rules, speaking freely, keeping her own pace, and refusing to pretend something happened when it didn't. Pattern would define her entire career. Howard Hughes affair. Mamie's first real brush with Hollywood power wasn't a studio head or a famous actor. It was Howard Hughes. She met him in 1949 during her early RKO days, right after winning Miss Palm Springs. He was older, rich, and deeply connected in the film world. She was 16 and ambitious. They started an on-and-off affair that lasted several years. Hughes was known for chasing young actresses, and Mamie fit the type, but she wasn't naive. She said he never made her feel forced. In fact, she set rules from the start. One night, before things got physical, she told him they'd have to use protection. Hughes didn't flinch. He already had a supply waiting. He came prepared, she later joked. Mamie admitted she made the decision consciously. Her idol, Jean Harlow, had also been linked to Hughes. Following in Harlow's footsteps felt like stepping into Hollywood history. She didn't see it as giving in. She saw it as a power move. Even after she married her first husband, Jack Newman, in 1950, she kept seeing Hughes. She said the marriage was short and mostly a mistake. Newman was a band leader, but their relationship didn't last the year. Hughes, however, kept reappearing. He didn't offer roles or deals, just dinners, conversation, and the occasional getaway. Mamie never painted him as a monster. She called him complicated, smart, and sometimes strange. He'd fly her places without warning or show up late at night with a car. He liked control, but he also respected her edge. She pushed back when others didn't, and Hughes liked the challenge. Their affair fizzled out quietly. There was no big fight, no scandal in the press. It was just another chapter in both their lives, one that Mamie looked back on with curiosity more than regret. In a town filled with whispered affairs and hidden truths, hers stood out because she never tried to hide it. She told the story herself, direct, witty, no shame. It wasn't love, she said, it was Hollywood, and she knew exactly what she was doing. Yankee Pasha romances. By 1954, Mamie Van Doren had her first major studio role in Yankee Pasha, a Technicolor adventure film shot on Universal's lot. The movie itself was forgettable. The behind-the-scenes action? Not so much. Mamie had just come off her stint with Howard Hughes and was single again. During Yankee Pasha, she jumped into two separate flings. One with the film's director, Joe Pevney, and another with her co-star, Jeff Chandler. Both men were older, established, and clearly interested. Mamie wasn't coy. She went for what she wanted. She later wrote in her autobiography, Playing the Field, that Chandler was sweet but distant. Their time together didn't last long, but he left an impression. She had more to say about Pevney, who directed several big-name films and had a habit of mixing business with pleasure. Mamie didn't mind. She was learning how to work the system while staying in control of it. Jack Palance also made a brief appearance in her life around this time. She described their encounter as fast and fiery. It didn't turn into anything serious, but it added to her growing reputation. People started whispering. Mamie didn't care. If the studios wanted to label her a seductress, she wasn't going to argue. She leaned into it. Unlike the other blondes of the era who tried to play innocent, Mamie refused to fake it. She flirted on her own terms. She picked her partners. She made no apologies. Her relationships weren't about climbing ladders. They were about curiosity, confidence, and chemistry. While Yankee Pasha pushed her further into the spotlight, it was her off-screen reputation that made her famous. She wasn't a studio puppet. She was wild, outspoken, and impossible to control. That scared some people, but it thrilled the press. Tabloids started printing stories about her love life, and Mamie didn't deny a thing. She figured honesty was more powerful than scandal. By the end of 1954, she had wrapped one movie, juggled 3 lovers, and kept full control of her public image. No handlers, no fake engagement rings. Just Mamie, calling her own shots and preparing for a whirlwind marriage that would shake things up even more. Bandleader Ray Anthony. In 1955, Mamie Van Doren did something even her fans didn't expect. She got married again, this time to Ray Anthony, a big band leader and close friend of Frank Sinatra. He was older, successful, and had the kind of Hollywood connections most actresses would kill for. Their wedding made headlines. It looked like a real fairy tale. For a while, it felt like one. They lived in a stylish home in Beverly Hills, threw dinner parties, and showed up arm in arm at clubs. Paparazzi followed them constantly. Mamie called it heaven on earth, and for a moment, she meant it. In 1956, they had a son, her only child. She said motherhood changed her, but not in the way the studio hoped. She didn't suddenly want to retire or stay home. She still loved the spotlight, and she wasn't about to give it up just because she had a baby. Ray Anthony didn't love that. Neither did the people around him. Friends warned him about marrying a sex symbol. The press labeled her wild. But Mamie didn't pretend to be something she wasn't. She still went to auditions, did photo shoots, and made appearances that raised eyebrows. Despite the glitz, the marriage started to crack early. Mamie said they were too different. Ray wanted a wife who stayed quiet and looked perfect. Mamie wanted a partner who respected her fire. She claimed she never cheated on him or on any of her husbands, but the gossip columns said otherwise. She ignored them. By 1961, the marriage was over. Their divorce wasn't messy in public, but Mamie was done playing the traditional wife. She kept custody of her son and kept working. Ray moved on. So did she. What stuck was the way she handled it. No dramatic interviews and sob stories. Only a few sharp lines in later interviews. It stopped working, so I stopped pretending. Rock and roll films. She wasn't waiting around for dramatic roles or serious scripts. She leaned straight into the era's wildest trend, rock and roll. Studios didn't quite know how to handle the music craze, but they knew Mamie fit the vibe: rebellious, sexy, loud, and fearless. Untamed Youth came first. She starred opposite rockabilly icon Eddie Cochran, playing a jailed farm worker who sings her way through teenage rebellion. The movie was low budget and barely reviewed by critics, but it became a cult hit. Cochran's on-screen charm and Mamie's bold attitude created something new, a crossover between music and movie stardom that hadn't really existed yet. Next came High School Confidential. In 1958, Mamie played a sultry teacher in a high school crawling with undercover agents and teen drug dealers. Jerry Lee Lewis performed the opening number on the back of a flatbed truck. The plot was nonsense, but the energy was off the charts. Kids packed the theaters. Adults were horrified. Mamie knew exactly what she was doing. She played it up, camp and all. By 1960, she starred in Sex Kittens Go to College with singer Conway Twitty. The title alone made headlines. The movie was pure fluff, but it kept her in the spotlight. Mamie had carved out a new niche. She wasn't Monroe's fragile dream girl or Novak's cool mystery. She was the brassy blonde who embraced the chaos, strutted through B-movies, and brought rock and roll to the big screen. Off-camera, Mamie kept her image loud and wild. She wore tight dresses, said whatever she wanted in interviews, and ignored studio warnings to tone it down. She wasn't trying to impress critics. She wanted fans. And she got them. Teenagers saw her as fun and fearless. Parents saw her as trouble. Studios didn't know what to do with her long-term, but they kept casting her in roles that matched the times: rebellious, sexy, and just a little dangerous. Mamie wasn't trying to win Oscars. She was building a legend on her terms. No scripts softened her, no directors tamed her, and no era suited her better than rock and roll. Vietnam War tours. The war was raging, but Mamie Van Doren didn't stay home. When the opportunity came to perform for U.S. troops in Vietnam, she didn't hesitate. She joined the USO tour circuit, flying straight into danger zones to entertain soldiers who were exhausted, wounded, or just trying to survive the week. Conditions were rough. She flew in a helicopter that got shelled midair. She wore a helmet on stage more than once, but she kept going. While most celebrity performers stuck to base shows and retreated fast, Mamie went further. She visited hospitals. She held hands. She posed for photos with soldiers who could barely sit up. She also noticed who wasn't doing the same. Bob Hope was famous for his USO tours, but Mamie later said he performed safely during the day, then flew out to Thailand by night. She didn't name names to start a feud, but she made it clear she stayed longer, went deeper, and took real risks. "I didn't do it for press," she said later. "I did it because they needed it." The experience changed her. Mamie had always been politically neutral in public, but seeing the war up close broke that. She started questioning why they were there, how POWs were being treated, and what the government wasn't saying. After visiting soldiers who had barely survived capture, her view shifted. The Eisenhower-era conservative was gone. Mamie became a vocal critic of the war, especially after seeing the aftermath in Hanoi. She didn't spin it into a career move. There were no photo spreads, no new records, no television specials to cash in. What stayed with her was the look in those soldiers' eyes and the sound of gunfire during a show. She'd spent years playing sexy and funny in front of cameras. Vietnam was different. It was real. That version of Mamie, tough, grounded, still glamorous, but visibly shaken, didn't fit Hollywood's image machine. But she didn't care. She'd done the thing no one expected. She stepped off the soundstage and into a war zone, and came back with stories no press agent could have written. Burt Reynolds' affair. Hollywood kept changing, but Mamie Van Doren wasn't going anywhere. By 1972, she was in her 40s and still turning heads. That's when Burt Reynolds walked into the picture. He was just starting to break into stardom, charming, cocky, and known for his shirtless magazine spreads. Mamie liked confidence. They hit it off fast. Their affair didn't last long, but it left a mark. Mamie later said Burt was funny and smooth, but not built for anything serious. She wasn't looking for a deep connection either. It was brief, playful, and exactly what it looked like. Two good-looking stars, both on their own paths, meeting in the middle for a few weeks of fun. That same year, Mamie married again, this time to Ross McClintock, a businessman from the Fluor Corporation. He wasn't famous, and their relationship moved fast. Too fast. She admitted later she never actually loved him. The marriage was annulled in 1973. It was clear she was trying something different. After a career built on image and chaos, maybe she thought a quiet marriage with a regular guy would work. It didn't. She said McClintock was a good man, but not her match. She needed energy, curiosity, something sharp. And he wasn't it. Throughout all of this, Mamie kept working. She appeared in B-movies, did stage shows, and maintained her public presence. But she wasn't chasing fame the same way. She seemed more selective, more amused by the machine she'd once fought so hard to be part of. What made this era different was how open she became. She started giving interviews with more bite, telling stories that publicists would have once buried. The Reynolds fling? She owned it. The short marriage? She laughed about it. She wasn't trying to spin anything. By the time the McClintock chapter closed, Mamie had 5 marriages behind her and a reputation for telling the truth, whether people liked it or not. She wasn't bitter. She wasn't desperate to settle down. She just kept moving, always in control of her own story. Lasting marriage, revelations. Mamie Van Doren finally slowed down, for real this time, in 1979. That's when she married Thomas Dixon, a businessman far removed from the Hollywood chaos. He wasn't rich, famous, or chasing headlines, but he stuck around. The marriage lasted decades through the fading of the studio system, the rise of reality television, and Mamie outliving nearly every peer from her era. She stayed out of scandals, but she didn't disappear. In interviews, she kept speaking her mind. Her autobiography, Playing the Field, gave blunt details about everyone from Rock Hudson to Howard Hughes. And in her 90s, she wasn't done. In a 2025 IndieWire interview, Mamie revisited the Rock Hudson story, the one that started back in 1953. She stuck to it. He tried, she said again, but it just wasn't there. She still believed Hudson was gay, not bisexual, and that their awkward post-Golden Globes encounter proved it. Not everyone agreed, but Mamie didn't care. She wasn't trying to rewrite history. She was determined to tell it her way. In 2025, at 94, she executive produced a documentary, Mamie Exposed, The Life and Loves of the Last Blonde Bombshell. It won't be a comeback, it will be a revelation. The documentary won't just rehash her film career, it will dig into her essence, why she always speaks her mind, why she turned her back on major studios, why she embraces a life less ordinary. Mamie seeks neither pity nor nostalgia. She will demand truth. By 93, Mamie Van Doren wasn't a forgotten bombshell. She was a living archive of glam, gossip, war zones, bad marriages, and Hollywood fakery. And she told it all with a wink. You know Gene Tierney from Laura and Heaven Can Wait, but you don't know the woman the studios tried to hide. This is the real story, stripped bare. Beauty breaks onto Broadway. Before Hollywood ever lit up her name, Gene Tierney was already turning heads on the East Coast. Born in Brooklyn in 1920, she grew up surrounded by books, manners, and pressure. Her father was a successful insurance broker. Her mother was a gym teacher with sharp posture and high expectations. Jean was raised to be proper, but deep down, she wanted to be seen. At 17, she visited Warner Brothers Studios during a family trip to California. A cameraman caught her profile and said, "You ought to be in pictures." That one offhand comment changed everything. But her father insisted she finish school first. She studied at finishing school in Switzerland, learned French, and returned poised, almost too poised. By the time she debuted at a society ball in 1938, her beauty was talked about in papers. Still, she wasn't content to be a debutante. She wanted the stage. She landed her first Broadway role in What a Life in 1938. The part was small, but critics noticed her presence. The New York Times called her striking, and that was all it took. She quickly booked another role in The Male Animal, where one particular audience member, 20th Century Fox founder Darryl F. Zanuck, took interest. Zanuck offered her a screen test. In the test footage, Jean smiled nervously, but the camera loved her. Her cheekbones, wide eyes, and steady voice didn't need much coaching. She signed a contract with Fox in 1940, but Jean wasn't just another pretty face. From the beginning, she insisted on roles that didn't box her in. She refused to play dumb or helpless. She even turned down early roles that required her to fake a heavy accent or overact. She wasn't loud, she didn't have to be. Jean Tierney walked into a room and the silence did the rest. By the end of 1940, she'd left Broadway behind, and Hollywood was just starting to realize what it had on its hands. Fox signs a starlet. She signed with 20th Century Fox in 1940, and the studio wasted no time molding her into a screen icon. She was 20, fresh from Broadway, and already had a reputation for being impossible to ignore. Her first film under Fox was The Return of Frank James, opposite Henry Fonda. She played Eleanor Stone, an aspiring newspaper reporter. Not exactly the most dazzling part, but it worked. Audiences noticed her, and the studio noticed the box office. Fox knew they had a gold mine, but in the 1940s, a contract meant more than a paycheck. It meant ownership. Studio heads picked your scripts, shaped your public image, and even told you who to date. Jean played along, but she didn't bend easily. She refused to change her name or pluck her eyebrows, which became one of her trademarks. In 1941, she starred in Tobacco Road, followed by Belle Starr, where she played a gunslinging Southern rebel. Both films were hits, but critics weren't kind. Some called her stiff. Others said she was just a face. Behind the scenes, she was quietly taking acting lessons and studying other performers on set. She never wanted to be just a decoration. Fox pushed her harder. By 1942, she was headlining films like Sundown and Rings on Her Fingers, moving quickly between dramas and comedies. The studio plastered her face on posters, pitched her as the most beautiful woman in film, and paired her with big names to boost her status. She didn't complain. She worked constantly. Between 1940 and 1943, she appeared in 9 films, some forgettable, some not. What mattered was the build-up. Zanuck believed Jean was one breakout role away from being a household name. He was right. By the end of 1943, Tierney had clawed her way out of bit parts and into something rare, leading lady status without playing by all the rules. She didn't flirt with the press. She didn't chase controversy. She showed up, hit her marks, and let the camera do the talking. Hollywood was full of loud starlets. Jean Tierney just stood still, and the world came to her. Scandalized in Heaven Can Wait. In 1943, Jean Tierney starred in Heaven Can Wait, a Technicolor fantasy comedy that didn't scream career-defining role, but that's exactly what it became. Directed by Ernst Lubitsch, the film was a polished, high-society romp. Jean played Martha Strobel Van Cleve, a loyal wife who endures a lifetime of her husband's nonsense with quiet dignity and style. Audiences saw something different. She wasn't just beautiful, she was luminous. Critics finally softened. The Los Angeles Times said she outshone the sets, which were designed to look like actual heaven. People couldn't stop talking about her face, her poise, her voice. She seemed untouchable. But the praise came with a strange undercurrent. Behind the camera, Jean was struggling with how Hollywood wanted to present her. The studio insisted she pose for increasingly provocative photo spreads. One publicist described her appeal as elegance with danger. She was uncomfortable with the wardrobe choices but agreed, until one publicity still, showing her in a clingy satin gown, exploded in newspapers across the country. That photo was everywhere. Letters poured in. Some fans were outraged. Others were obsessed. Tierney became the center of unwanted attention. She didn't do interviews about the photo. She didn't complain publicly. But friends later said she hated how that moment changed her image. Studio executives, however, saw dollar signs. The photo in the film cemented her as both a movie star. She was nominated for a National Board of Review award. Suddenly, Jean was headlining every fashion article and fan magazine. Her phone rang nonstop. Directors wanted her. Journalists chased her. She was now the face of a new kind of leading lady, refined, smart, but sold to the public with a wink. Jean didn't fight the wave, but she didn't trust it either. She once told a friend, "They talk about you like you're a painting they just hung." It wouldn't be long before that painting started haunting people. Laura Sparks' obsession. If Heaven Can Wait turned Jean Tierney into a star, Laura, 1944, made her a legend and a ghost. Directed by Otto Preminger, the film was a psychological noir where Jean played the title character, a woman so enchanting that even her supposed death couldn't stop men from falling in love with her. In the movie, a detective investigates her death, only to become obsessed with her portrait. The twist? She's not actually dead. She walks in halfway through the film, alive and graceful, stunning the audience, and him. That portrait became iconic. In real life, it was a photograph touched up to look like a painting. But for many, it didn't matter. Jean became Laura. Strangers wrote letters claiming to have fallen in love with her character. A few even claimed they'd dreamed about her. The obsession crossed into unsettling territory. One man reportedly wrote to Fox requesting the painting for his bedroom. Another sent marriage proposals weekly. Jean didn't find it flattering. She found it eerie. The film was a hit. Critics hailed it as one of the best mysteries of the decade. Jean's performance was praised for being both icy and vulnerable, controlled but emotionally loaded. The camera barely moved when she was on screen. It didn't need to. She received praise from her toughest critic, the press. Even The New Yorker, known for snubbing studio stars, admitted she had an uncanny presence. But the film's success came at a cost. The more people adored Laura, the less they seemed to care about Jean Tierney. The studio leaned in. More posters, more portraits, more mystery woman headlines. Behind the scenes, Jean began feeling erased by the very image that made her famous. Tyrone Power and tragedy. In 1946, Jean Tierney began a romance with Tyrone Power, one of the biggest male stars in Hollywood. He was charming, impossibly handsome, and just as boxed in by fame as she was. They met at a dinner party and clicked immediately. But behind the polished smiles, their connection wasn't smooth. Power had recently returned from World War II service and was emotionally distant. Jean had just wrapped several grueling film projects and was emotionally fragile. Still, they dated quietly for over a year, often traveling to Mexico or sneaking around the studio system's ever-present photographers. She once said he was the only man I ever really loved. Their relationship stalled when Tyrone left to film Captain from Castile Abroad. Jean hoped he'd return ready for marriage. Instead, he came back with distance and a different story. His family reportedly didn't approve of Jean. She wasn't high society enough, despite her upbringing. That rejection crushed her. In 1947, he ended things for good. Jean spiraled. Friends noticed she stopped going out. One co-star said she seemed unreachable. She buried herself in work, but felt abandoned and humiliated. Power's next marriage to a Latin actress, Linda Christian, was a public spectacle. Jean stayed silent but didn't hide her heartbreak from those closest to her. The loss wasn't just personal, it was public. Gossip columns had speculated for months about a wedding that never happened. She became the subject of what went wrong stories and cruel headlines about women being too cold or too controlling. Looking back, it wasn't just a breakup. It was the first public crack in the image Jean had spent years building. The woman who could make men fall in love with a painting had been left behind by the real thing. She never dated Tyrone again, but she never got over him either. Motherhood and silent pain. In 1943, at the height of her fame, Jean Tierney became pregnant with her first child, Daria. She was thrilled. She'd married fashion designer Oleg Cassini earlier that year, and for once, her life seemed steady. But something went horribly wrong. While attending a Hollywood canteen event for soldiers during her early pregnancy, a female fan approached her. The woman had been sick with rubella, German measles, but snuck out of quarantine just to meet Jean. The star, not knowing the risk, greeted her kindly and posed for a photo. Months later, Jean gave birth to Daria. The baby was born blind, partially deaf, and severely developmentally disabled. Doctors confirmed the cause: prenatal exposure to rubella. Jean was devastated. The guilt nearly consumed her. She blamed herself, even though she'd had no idea what had happened until after the fact. Her marriage to Cassini started to crack under the pressure. They argued constantly about treatment, care, and guilt. Cassini wanted to send Daria to a private facility for long-term care. Jean resisted, but eventually agreed, knowing she couldn't give the child the care she needed alone. The fan who exposed her? Years later, that woman approached Jean again, this time at a book signing, and confessed. Jean was polite but shaken. She simply responded, "You have given me the most dreadful sorrow of my life." She almost never spoke about Daria publicly. When she did, it was brief and tightly controlled. She visited her daughter often, sometimes bringing toys or books, but always leaving in tears. This tragedy became a private burden that followed Jean through every film, every red carpet, every fake smile. She kept working, kept showing up, but something behind her eyes had changed. Her fans saw glamour. Her peers saw sadness. One friend said she didn't wear grief, it lived in her voice. Mental hospitals and recovery. By the early 1950s, Jean Tierney was unraveling. The press didn't report it yet, but people on set noticed. She forgot lines, lost weight, and sometimes froze during scenes. She had trouble sleeping. She cried without warning. After finishing The Left Hand of God in 1955, she walked away from Hollywood. She tried to recover privately. Doctors diagnosed her with manic depression, now known as bipolar disorder. She was prescribed barbiturates and given rest orders, but nothing worked. Her mood swung hard, elation one day, despair the next. Friends described her as distant, ghostly. In 1957, she voluntarily admitted herself to the Harkness Pavilion in New York, a psychiatric clinic. When her condition didn't improve, she was moved to the Institute of Living in Connecticut. There, she underwent over 20 rounds of electroconvulsive therapy. She later said she lost big chunks of her memory, including entire scripts and moments from childhood. She stayed in institutions on and off for years. During one break in 1958, she attempted a comeback by working in a department store under a false name. When a customer recognized her, tabloids ran with the story, "Jean Tierney broke, working retail." The truth was more complex. She was trying to feel normal again. The press framed it as a fall from grace. But behind the scenes, she was slowly rebuilding. Therapy helped. Medication changed. She reconnected with friends and even wrote letters to Daria again. She eventually made a cautious return to public life. Not everyone welcomed her back, but some directors remembered what she was capable of. She wasn't cured, but she was stronger. She said later, "You don't come back the same, but you come back." JFK, romance rumors fly. Gene Tierney and John F. Kennedy crossed paths long before he became president. Their connection began in 1946, shortly after Kennedy returned from World War II and was newly elected to Congress. At the time, Gene was separated from her husband, Oleg Cassini, and trying to balance fame, heartbreak, and motherhood. They met through mutual friends in the political and Hollywood circles that often overlapped. Kennedy was young, charismatic, and ambitious. Gene, still recovering emotionally, found comfort in his charm. Their relationship developed quietly. There were dinners, long conversations, and a few public appearances. It wasn't a tabloid frenzy, but insiders noticed. By some accounts, their relationship grew serious. There were rumors of marriage. Gene was Catholic. So was Kennedy. But there was a problem. She was a divorcee, and his political advisors weren't thrilled. Marrying a divorced Hollywood actress didn't exactly align with a clean-cut public image, especially not for a man eyeing the White House. Kennedy ended the relationship. Politely, but clearly. Gene was devastated, though she never spoke ill of him. In her memoir, she referred to a man who ended things due to ambitions beyond personal happiness. Most readers understood who she meant. By the time JFK was elected president in 1960, Gene had moved on, at least publicly. She eventually remarried, leaving Hollywood behind for a quieter life in Texas. The media tried to link them again in the early 60s, but those were just recycled rumors from years past. There was no rekindling, no late-night visits to the White House, no secret second chapter. Come back and advise and consent. In 1962, after years out of the spotlight, Gene Tierney returned to the screen in Advise and Consent, a political drama directed by Otto Preminger, the same man who once directed her in Laura. This wasn't a glamour role. She played the poised wife of a senator, with measured dialogue and a quiet presence. But that was the point. Preminger knew Gene's story. He gave her the role not just for her talent, but as a statement. She still belonged on screen. The film itself was bold, touching on blackmail, government secrets, and even hinted at scandals. Gene held her own alongside heavyweights like Henry Fonda and Charles Lawton. Critics noticed. They praised her restraint, her confidence, and her refusal to overplay a part that could have easily been forgettable. The New York Times said her scenes added a sense of real-world dignity. But Gene's comeback wasn't just about performance, it was about survival. She had weathered a public mental health battle, a divorce, family estrangement, and the brutal judgment of an industry that didn't give second chances to women over 40. She wasn't there to prove she could still be beautiful. She was there to show she was still standing. After Advise and Consent, she made a few more appearances. Nothing major, just select roles. She didn't need the fame anymore. She'd tasted all of it, good and bad. By the mid-1960s, Gene quietly retired from film. She remarried, lived in Houston for a while, and kept her distance from Hollywood drama. She hosted charity events, visited her daughter, and stayed out of the headlines. But for those who watched Advise and Consent, that short return was more than a cameo. It was a quiet reclaiming of a career on her own terms. Secrets revealed in memoir. In 1979, Gene Tierney did something most classic Hollywood stars avoided. She told the truth. Her memoir, Self-Portrait, hit shelves without glamour shots and without the usual spin. It was raw, direct, and devastating. She didn't open with her film roles or red carpets. She opened with Daria. She explained the rubella exposure, the birth complications, and the years of guilt that followed. She described the breakdowns, the shock therapy, and the shame that came with losing control in public. People think a breakdown is falling apart, she wrote. Sometimes it's just going numb. She called out the studio system for treating actors like property. She named names, carefully, but clearly. She admitted that at one point she wanted to end her life. She didn't glorify it. She didn't dramatize it. She just said it plainly and moved on. The most surprising part? She didn't sound bitter. Her voice was calm, even wry. She talked about fame as a mirror that never tells the truth. She joked about therapy and described psychiatrists the way other people describe bad directors. Politely, but with a sting. Readers were stunned. This wasn't the Gene Tierney they thought they knew. This wasn't Laura or Heaven Can Wait. This was a woman who had been adored, damaged, institutionalized, ignored, and still found the nerve to say, "Here's what really happened." The book became a quiet hit. It didn't top bestseller lists, but it passed from reader to reader. Film historians called it one of the most honest books to come out of Golden Age Hollywood. Young actresses read it to understand what the business really cost. Gene Tierney didn't give fans the version of herself they wanted. She gave them the truth, and somehow that made her unforgettable all over again.